Hello, welcome to Animazing, the stories of Kevin Seymour. I am your host, Aramis, and today I have a very special treat for y'all. We are going to be going over the movie Catnapped, which was released in Japan May 30th, 1995, and in the US it was released March 7th, 2000, and according to the scripts, was last revised June 22nd, 1999. According to Part A, B, C, and D of these scripts that I will have linked to this episode, along with the archive that I've created on the website and any other resources that I can find. First of all, what is Catnapped? Let's get that out of the way first before we dive headfirst into the cast, the crew, and other information. I am pulling this off of the back of the VHS tape that I have acquired for this episode. I actually watched it on a VHS player, and then subsequent watches on YouTube where it is readily available to watch. Welcome to the cat world. Banipal Witt, a charming story of love and friendship. Catnapped will uplift your spirits and inspire your dreams. A movie the whole family can enjoy. Written and directed by Takahashi Nakamura, an animation director on the legendary film Akira. And then following that, it goes into the description. There's a place, a whole world that belongs only to the cats. A hidden world known as Banipal Witt, where the sun changes creatures from the outer world into monsters. Travel there as two young children set off on the fanciful trip with a desperate group of feline engineers to save Banipal Witt from the evil sorcerer cat, Buburina, whose very touch turns any living thing into a balloon. With this talent and the monster dog Papadoll, Buburina hopes to control all of Banipal Witt, and only Toriyasu, Papadoll's former owner, has any hope of returning Papadoll back to normal. But can they rescue Papadoll and defeat Buburina before the sun rises? With that teaser of the film out of the way, I do want to fix a few pronunciations that I had made during my last two episodes of the series. We're going to go over those right now. So for Michael Sorich, I was calling him Sorik. The pronunciation is Sorich. For Apostolina is the proper pronunciation for another one of the actors that I discussed. For Yutaka, it was Masiba, not Masiba. Next is Richard Cancino. I was saying, I think, Consino. And then the last two would be Gloria Gaines. Instead of Gloria Gaines, it's spelled Gines, but it's pronounced Gaines. And then Brienne. With that address, now I want to go over the Catnapped English dub crew. Then I will be going over the cast. Starting with the director, Kevin Seymour, using the pseudonym Quint Lancaster. The executive producer, Hideki Goto. And then the producers, Hiro Tsukamoto, Yutaka Masiba, Haruyo Kansaku. The ADR script was done by Mary Claypool, also known as Mary Mason, which can be shown both in the official credits and on the official scripts that I was able to get a hold of, or at least samples of. Translation, Rika Takahashi. Final mix, Michael McCarty, as well as Les Claypool, also known as Les E. Claypool III. Dialogue editing, also Les. Additional sound effects, also Les. Digital dialogue tracking, Phil Brewster, also known as Big Phil Brewster. Coordination was done by Kenji Nakamura, Osamu Masiba, and Yasushi Tatekawa. And then lastly, the online editor was credited to Greg Simone. I would like correction on that. And to credit specific facilities and companies, we have for ADR Production, Animaze Inc., ZRO Limit Productions Inc., Pioneer Entertainment USA LP. For translation, we have ZRO Limit Productions Inc. For recording facility, we have Magnitude 8 Post. I'll shorten it to Mag 8 for short. And lastly, for online facility, we have VDI Multimedia. Next, I'm going to be going over the cast of Catnapped with support from the official credits and the script samples I was able to get my hands on for this episode. Starting off with Toriyasu, voiced by Dorothy Fahn under the pseudonym Dorothy Melendrez. Yasuo, or Toriyasu, is described as a young hero of our story, about 9 or 10 years old. His name is Yasuo, but his informal or nickname is Toriyas. In translation, it is spelled Toriyasu, but it is mostly pronounced without the U on the tape, so according to the character list, it was omitted. Now, according to the script for this, there were 2 actresses who were considered for the role. One was Dorothy Fahn, and the other one was Brianne Seidel. Next up, we have the character of Meeko, who is portrayed by Sandy Fox, and according to her, one of her favorite roles she has done for Animaze. Now, I do not have the female character list in front of me, so I do not have a description from the official script, but I'm going to do my best for the female leads. The best way to describe Meeko is she is the younger sister of Yasuo by, I want to say, 2 to 3 years. Very childlike, doesn't know how to control her volume level, still believes in aliens, and has that childlike sense of wonder, but also being very tough and stubborn, which Sandy delivers amazingly in this film, and is probably my second favorite performance in the entirety of the film. Next we have Buburina, voiced by the legendary Mary Elizabeth McGlynn under the pseudonym Melissa Williamson. The best way to describe Buburina is she is the princess of Banipal Witt to her mother and father, the king and queen. She reminds me a lot of the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland. Very crazy and gets everything that she's ever wanted. Never has been told no in her life, which is a plot point in the movie. Almost giving me Madame Medusa vibes from The Rescuers. Now, before I go any further, I do want to talk about their performances a little bit before I continue on with the crew list. Starting with Dorothy's portrayal of Toriyasu, also known as Yasuo. I think she did a really phenomenal job. Very much the young boy voiceover. I think she was a very good pick, and I think the development of Yasuo's character throughout the movie is very telling with Dorothy's portrayal of the character from the beginning, where Yasuo didn't really care about anything, very much your rebellious child, to more mature and much kinder individual. Next, I want to touch a little bit more on Sandy's performance as Meeko. I had already said before, it's one of her favorites. It's probably one of my favorites of hers. Gives her a lot of character to work with. Her dialogue with other characters, the chemistry with the other characters, and her overall performance sells the authenticity of it all. And I think Sandy was the perfect choice for Meeko. Circling back, though, to Mary as Buburina, this is the first property that I'm covering with Mary in any role, due to Ghost in the Shell, the original one, not having Mary as the Major. We will be getting into the later Ghost in the Shells, where she is in fact Major Kusanagi. But as a first exposure within this project, I find it very funny because she is known for playing very strong, stoic characters, and Buburina is this childish princess who gets whatever she wants, very crazy, and I think Mary knocks it out of the park. There was a line, I'll talk about it whenever we go into the film, that made me laugh my butt off. And so I'm really glad that this was the first time I got to talk about Mary's performance, because it will definitely not be the last, with how many titles she appears in, how many she directs, and so on. We're not done with Buburina just yet. We need to talk about the portrayal of young Buburina by Lenore Zan under the pseudonym Zan, and I did confirm this with her at NostalgiaCon New Orleans prior to recording this episode, that this was in fact one of her pseudonyms. And with Lenore, I know we will be discussing her more in depth with the TV show Slayers, which was directed by Wendy Lee. Now, her portrayal as young Buburina reflects a lot on the portrayal that we see with Mary and the older Buburina, but this is definitely a much more child, very much hasn't gone completely crazy, but is still nepotistic and delusional. And we'll get into more of her interactions with some of the other characters that were introduced during that flashback. But just know that Lenore does a really good job of portraying a young Buburina comparatively to Mary's portrayal of the much older Buburina. Next up, I want to introduce the character of Choo Choo, portrayed by Leah Sargent. Now, the best way to describe Choo Choo, I'm going to quote Toriyasu, calling her a tomboy. I think that's the perfect encapsulation of Choo Choo. She is this tomboy knight who is the younger sister of one of the other characters that I'll get to mentioning later, named Doh Doh. There also seems to be, I don't want to call it love, but definitely some sparks between Choo Choo and Toriyasu throughout the film. And I think Leah does a really good job of portraying Choo Choo as a whole. The character development from the beginning of the film to the end of the film, understanding the character, which we will go over as we start reviewing the film as a whole. Next character we have is called Sandada, voiced by Tom Weiner, using the pseudonym Abe Lasser, which was the same one that he used in Ghost in the Shell and many other films that we will be covering. Since this is a male character, I can actually reference the script notes. According to the script notes, Sandada is described as a wise old cat wizard. Very simple, very to the point. Also, good guy. On the notes, it just has a hyphen with Weiner's name, showing A, that it is Weiner, even though the credits show it as Abe Lasser, and B, at least to the script, there was no one else being considered for the role by Kevin. And it was good hearing more of Tom's performances, since the last time we talked about him in this podcast was in Ghost in the Shell as Project 2701, or the Puppet Master, which in that episode I discussed how much I loved his monologue. So seeing him in a much more good guy, very soft, the kind wizard role, I think he did a really good job with that, especially considering for a majority of the film he was a balloon. Now, moving on, we get to some of my favorite characters in the whole movie, and to be honest, carry most of the plot elements or dialogue, which are the three cats. I'm going to introduce all the names all together, and then I'm going to go through each of the actors. We have Hinoji, Hoi Hoi, and Tsutaboke. Starting with Hinoji, voiced by the amazing Michael Sorich. In the script, he is described as one of Yasuo's abductors, a bit short-tempered, a little sense of humor, but a good guy. Looks like under the notes it says Sorich, says leaves next day, which I have no idea what that means. Something to look into. Next up is Hoi Hoi, voiced by Simon Prescott under the pseudonym Simon Isaacson. Under the script, it describes Hoi Hoi as an older cat and companion of Hinoji and Tsutaboke. Fairly easygoing, good guy. Has the note Prescott next to it, which confirms it is Prescott. No other further notes on that. And before I forget, Hinoji is the cat with the goatee, Hoi Hoi is the cat with the full beard, and Tsutaboke, our last of our three, has a clean face. He is voiced by Michael Forrest as the pseudonym Alfred Thor. And according to the script, Tsutaboke is considered the nicest of the trio, and he takes a shine to Meeko, which is definitely shown within the film. And under the notes, it just says Forrest, which does confirm it is him, even with the pseudonym. With all three of them discussed, I do want to make a note that Hinoji, Hoi Hoi, and Tsutaboke are what makes the story continue to move, especially in the early and mid parts of the movie before Meeko and Yasuo really become their own characters and really carry the story. Moving on to one of the other main protagonists of the film, Doh Doh, voiced by the late and incredible Kevin Seymour as his pseudonym Dougherty Grant. So yes, he uses both Dougherty Grant and Quint Lancaster in the same movie, as he has done several times. Now, the best way to describe Doh Doh is under his character description, the bad guy, former sorcerer's apprentice, specifically to Tom Weiner's character, Sandada. He fell under Buburina's spell and does her bidding. And my honest opinion of the performance is that he knocked it out of the park. Kevin was always the type of person who valued authenticity. He really threw himself into the character of Doh Doh. Very manic, very evil, almost Disney evil. I think I made a comparison to the Rescuers earlier. Doh Doh is one of those characters that is just infatuated with Buburina, and within the film it is stated that he fell in love with her. But Kevin just brings that extra flavor that only his voice and his performance probably could have provided. And I think because he knew the property the most, he was always the expert in the room for whatever he was working on. I think that's what really carried his performance as Doh Doh. And I think it helps that the character has these beady yellow eyes. It's honestly, whenever I think of Kevin's song, The Creature Man now, I really imagine Doh Doh as the Creature Man. Whenever Kevin was singing that, he brings his voice, which I'm not going to even attempt because I am not Kevin, and Kevin always had a way with voices according to Joe Romersa. Moving on, we have the King and the Queen, Buburina's parents. Starting with the King, who is voiced by Bob Pappenbrook. Now, the interesting thing with this credit is that it was not in the original credits of the film, and even in IMDb, he is listed as John Smallberries. The only proof that I was able to find that Bob was in the film was from the character list script, which describes the king as Buburina's father, kindly but overly permissive to his daughter. And it says in two different points, one on the left, one on the right, it says Pappenbrook, and crossed out is Spellos, which I am going to assume is Peter Spellos, who we last covered in Ghost in the Shell. And the Queen, who is voiced by Barbara Goodson, and the description for her is essentially the same. Buburina's mother, kindly, and of course letting her daughter do pretty much anything that she wants. In the film, for the flashback, they definitely give off a vibe of a king and a queen who given to their daughter, and the younger version, of course, as I mentioned, was portrayed by Lenore, and the chemistry between the three of them is phenomenal. So moving on, we have a few more characters to touch on, and then we can go ahead and start talking about the film. I'm going to do kind of a lightning round here. We have Toru, which in the credits I'm seeing Toru, but in the actual script it's Tohru. We have Toru's friend. Now I see two friends here. I see Kazuo and Takuma, and according to all three of their descriptions, it says schoolmate of Yasuo who teases him. Now there is a note, I can't see if that says Melik Dave or something next to Kazuo. There's no other names on the other two, but Toru is credited as Brienne Siddal as Ian Hawke. And then Toru's friend I've seen mostly credited to Barbara Goodson. Now I could assume that's Takuma. I could be mistaken. However, we're just going to go with that. And then next we're going to be discussing two more characters that were introduced during the flashback scene. Remlam, who is voiced by William H. Bassett, and Lily, Remlam's daughter. Now I couldn't find an official credit for her. However, I could assume that it was Trixie Wood, or it could have been one of the other female actresses who played her for the few lines that she did have. I'm hoping to get confirmation with another script or something, but it's something I am looking into. Now, these two characters were introduced during the flashback scene with young Buburina, the king, the queen, and all the other dukes and duchesses and other forms of minor royalty. And according to the script, Remlam is described as the elderly magician whose daughter's death, which is Lily, is caused by young Buburina, which it is, and he's the one who puts the curse on Buburina that whenever she touches somebody, they turn into a balloon. The balloon King Midas, if you will. Now, there are some notes here I cannot read, but I can clearly see Bassett's name, which confirms his pseudonym is tied to him. And his performance in the flashback prior to his daughter's death and post his daughter's death is something quite remarkable. I'll go more in depth into that whenever I get to that part of the movie. Moving on, we got two more named characters, and then we're going to be moving on to the actual story itself. Lastly, we have Yasuo and Meeko's mother, voiced by Louise Chamis. I could be butchering that. If I am, I will correct it in a future episode. And Papadoll, the the dog and what is actually on the cover of the VHS and DVD being the monsterized version of Papadoll and the linchpin of the whole movie. Now, according to the Japanese, there is actually a voice actor for Papadoll, and I'm curious if one of the other actors voiced Papadoll in the English. One of the questions I might leave for either the producers or the audio engineer. Now, with all that out of the way, I got a few more actors to introduce and a few more character names to introduce that I have access to, and then we're going to get into the movie. First things first, under additional voices, I have Christopher Carroll under the pseudonym Sam Strong, Steve Kramer, Joe Ockman as Joey Lotsko, Kirk Thornton as Sparky Thornton, and I mentioned earlier Trixie Wood. That is actually a pseudonym. Her real name, according to my research, is Gracie Moore. Now, I'm assuming that a lot of some of the Wallas or some of these minor characters I'm about to list off were voiced by these actors. Getting into that, we have the balloon guards. So those are the castle guards in the movie that have been turned into balloons. We have a balloon prince cat, who I'll get into later. According to the notes, it says muffled and 1 O/M reaction. So I'm assuming that's like a Soldier A, Soldier B, and Soldier C. Soldier C being one of the guards with Sandada. A royal guard, which is considered reactions only. An audience cat, which explicitly states it's an audience walla. There's an engineer, a lookout guard, and then according to the script, it says that there are 3 male balloon captives, numbered 1, 2, and 3. Now, because I do not have the subsequent character list for females, I do not know any of the other characters like that, but I know there isn't a lot, maybe some female nobility, especially during the Wallas, which if you do not know what a Walla is a recording session that are used to generate authentic background crowd noises of people or creatures. A good example from my last episode was the marketplace from Ghost in the Shell, and according to actors like Michael Sorich, the way that they would make these Wallas is they would put multiple people into a recording booth. The story I have from Michael is it was him and 2 of the Fawns, probably Dorothy and Tom or Dorothy and Melissa, into a booth the size of a telephone booth. And they would record Wallas here and there. And there was a saying, CDFA, crack door for air. Anytime they would record, because there's 2 or 3 of them in that booth, crack the door of the recording booth to get fresh air. With all that out of the way, I want to go over certain key moments of the film, discuss my favorite parts of the movie in chronological order, and overall just give a review of the dub. With that out of the way, I think the first thing to address is the fact that Sandy Fox is the MVP of the opening sections of the movie. Her portrayal as Meeko sets the stage for what's to come. The fact that she is going on and on and on and on and on like a child of that age would. And the fact that I don't know if it was Phil in the mixing or if Sandy was actually speaking with no volume control like Meeko was. That's honestly what sells it to me, is the fact that Meeko speaks like a child would of that age. Sandy does. And overall, within the first 5 minutes, it's just Meeko going on and on about Papadoll, about her swimsuit, about all these different things, with Yasuo occasionally clapping back. Very pre-teen angst. But one of the things to mention here is, I think, one of the ongoing background gags, which is everyone calls him Toriyasu, and only Toriyasu's friends are allowed to call him Toriyasu. Other than that, you're supposed to call him Yasuo. And I think Meeko only calls him Yasuo that one time. And after that, whenever she gets hyper again like an actual kid would, she goes back to saying Toriyasu. And for sure, that is definitely in the original, but it fits really well with the English dub. And one little note I want to make now is looking at some of the example pages from the script. Yasuo is what it's labeled under the script. So every line, it's Yasuo's line. It's not Toriyasu's line, which I find very fascinating. Also of note, and I'm going to link all this stuff later in the description, is each character is highlighted a different color. So in the example I'm looking at, Hoi Hoi is yellow, Yasuo is blue, Choo Choo is like a light pink, Sudaboke is a dark, like magenta, Sandada is black, and so on. I don't know who made these color decisions, but it's just a fascinating little detail I remember reading in the script. Moving on, with a lot of the dialogue between Toriyasu and Meeko, one line really stuck out to me, and I'd have to listen to the original Japanese, but it's whenever Toriyasu just says, "There's no life on Venus." And then it was followed with Meeko saying, "Martians took him." And this is in regards to what happened to Papadoll. And for me, that it felt a bit out of place. Just Yasuo saying that, but it fits with how two kids would talk to each other. And the dialogue continues on. Overall, the first entry point where we're just seeing Meeko and Yasuo's initial relationship in the film, talking about Papadoll going missing, and then within the scenes you have some of the cats from Banipal Witt, specifically our trio of cats, wandering around. I find that as a fun backdrop to the scene. Now, moving on, we're still in the real world section. That's what I'm going to call the section before they go to, I'm just going to call it Catland, because saying Banipal Witt over and over and over again, I'm going to butcher it. So, before they go to Catland, we're introduced to our trio of cats, Hanoji, Hoi Hoi, and Sudaboke, which are played by Michael Sorich, Simon Prescott, and Michael Forrest, respectively. And overall, their introduction, how they interact with each other, honestly is a really good introduction to the characters. Their synergies, their roles, and their personalities are all laid to bear, even as they interact with the kids for the first time, which gets to the scream that Sandy gave out whenever she was awoken up by the cats when they were trying to take her brother, because he happens to be the owner of Papadoll. And just the writing for that scene and the adaptation by Mary Claypool was phenomenal. One concept I want to get out of the way now that we've introduced the cats is the ball system. So we use minutes and seconds and hours and days to measure our time. They use balls and grains. Now, they'll be like, there's 86 balls to the left, or 9,600 balls have passed, or there's 12 balls, 18 grains. And the other concept that many people may not be aware of is the idea of time dilation. The way that they put it is a full day in their land is only 3 minutes in the real world. Vice versa, when 3 minutes pass in the real world, 1 full day passes. So, in this case, we saw these tomcats early in the morning whenever they went off to school, the kids. So if we were to do the math and assume that the kids woke up around, say, 6 a.m., 6 or 7 a.m. to go to school, and they were in bed by 9 o'clock, somewhere around there. It's very loose numbers, but say that's 15 hours, that's 900 minutes, divide that by 3 minutes per day in the cat world, and we would end up with 300 days. Now, I don't think Papadoll's been wreaking havoc for 300 days, but that's why this is a children's movie. But I find that funny how they say 3 minutes in the real world is 1 day there, and they've been gone for 9,600 balls. So I wonder, I have questions, let's just put it like that, but I don't think I'm going to get those questions answered unless I talk to the person who wrote the story and they're in Japan. So I just want to get those two things out of the way. They actually do state how long a day lasts, which is 30 balls and 300 grains. Now, if we take the comment that was stated earlier that 9,600 balls had passed, it actually equates to what was said earlier about 300 days. Now, ignoring the 300 grains, or I think it was 3,000 grains, if we just divide 9,600 balls by 30 balls, that's 320 days. So we can assume that 3,000 grains on top of that will bring it down to our nice 300-ish number. I'm not sure how long a grain is. That one's a bit harder to calculate. But it means that the continuity is right on point. They were there in the morning, and then they found them in the evening. So, and that's when the comment of 9,600 balls was made. So I find that detail really well put, and I'm glad that in the dub they captured that still. Even though I figure it's a Japanese script thing, I like the consistency. So, with that out of the way, we go through the bedroom scene. We have Sandy, Meeko going through the screaming. We have the trio going back and forth, saying what they got to do. Overall, really well produced scene, really well mixed scene, especially with the scream. I think that was really well done. Also, one thing I want to note is in the script samples that I've been reading, it will tell you facial movement, teasing. It's all really fascinating, and I really like it. Also, I know I've been talking a lot about the cats and about Meeko, but I do not want to skimp out on Yasuo. Yasuo's performance early on very much mirrors his early development as a character. Very preteen, very angsty, very much doesn't want to be made fun of or bullied, so he acts like he's not interested in anything. Very disillusioned. And I think Dorothy does a really good job of conveying that. I think her performance is really well done. I think the direction is really well done. And I think the script is really well written and conveyed in the script writing. I think the direction was also really well done as well. But I also like the panicky noises that Dorothy makes as Yasuo. I think that really sells it. Now that I'm more comfortable saying it, Banipal Witt is our next destination. We get to see the cat that holds the essential linchpin of the entire city up, kind of introducing us to a problem that could be done later if a certain crazy cat lady wanted to topple the city with a giant mouse, but I'm getting way ahead of myself. So we get to Banipal Witt, and the first place we are going is Sandada's workshop. Before I continue, I do want to make note that Banipal Witt gives me Studio Ghibli, whichever is the pronunciation you prefer, vibes if I dip those vibes into acid. The colorfulness of it all is only taken aback by the fact of how serious the plot can be, and how they basically made a princess King Midas with balloon hands. So, it always makes me laugh looking at the colorful world of Catnapped and realizing how serious of a plot it really is. It's King Midas, but with balloon hands. And I love how the performances of the villains really capture the seriousness of it all, while also being completely unhinged. So now we're going to get to Sandada's workshop and then few more scenes in there, and then I'll really want to get to Buburina and Doh Doh. Now, before we do end up going and meeting Sandada, I will note a small highlight being the leads turning into cats. Meeko's meow and Yasuo's overall freak out are definitely a highlight in that scene. I bet you that was a lot of fun to record. Now, as mentioned, Sandada is played by Tom Weiner, who we last saw as the puppet master in Ghost in the Shell, which, of course, I loved the monologuing from that movie. And we essentially trade the monologuing for exposition dump. That is what Sandada is, exposition dump, and I think he serves that role really well, summarizing the plot at the current moment, like with Papadoll wreaking havoc, which is insane to think about that Papadoll has been wreaking havoc for 300 of their days. I find that amazing, and the city's still standing. And after the exposition, which I like how this isn't just a long 5-minute dump, it's short, sweet, to the point, we get introduced to Choo Choo, played by Leah Sargent, and essentially get the plot moving. That's what this movie is really good at, is keeping the plot moving. And one little comment she made about them being gone for days, as I said, makes me laugh, because by our math, they were gone for 300 of their days, 300 to 320 of their days. So her saying, "You've been gone for days," and another comment earlier in the film saying that their life expectancy has gone down because of the time dilation, is insane to think about how their days actually work and how fast-paced the movie is. Even if we take the actual runtime of an hour and 15 and cut out the first 15 minutes for their world, we could assume that their day only runs for an hour, which is insane to think about. But now we're using Choo Choo as our transition over to probably my favorite character in the whole film, which is Doh Doh, voiced by Kevin Seymour. And honestly, Kevin does a great job in any role that I've heard him in thus far. I think Doh Doh is just a well-written character. I think the adaptation was really well done, and the fact that Kevin, even in his singing career, loved creature-sounding voices, being able to be this evil, obsessed cat riding atop a giant monster dog fit exactly with what Kevin liked. And these are just my educated thoughts from all that I know about him thus far. And with that, we also get to our first Walla scene, which is the townspeople. I'm just going to say that the mix on this Walla was really well done, and I'm assuming it's a mixture of a good chunk of the male and female cast. Couldn't tell you who's in the Walla, but I'm assuming it's a bunch of the people in the additional voices category. But I do have to give props to Phil Brewster on the mixing for this. It's really well done, and I look forward to listening to more of the mixes in this film and other films by Phil. And there are also some creature sounds from Papadoll, which, as I said, I'm going to confirm and later add on to either another video or archival research episode where I discuss new items that I've learned. So for right now, Papadoll could either be having their original Japanese dialogue added on, which I find highly unlikely. I think, moreover, one of the additional voices, or even one of the actors here, in fact, voiced Papadoll. Heck, I'd find it funny if Kevin voiced Papadoll, but I will figure that out and add it on later. But continuing on, Kevin's performance continues phenomenally, carries the scene. We go back to Sandada's mansion. And one little detail I like is when Choo Choo's tail slaps Yasuo. Yasuo does make a sound, and I do appreciate that detail. I'm glad that they recorded that. I'm glad it made it in. I love things like that. I love little details like that. I will note one of my favorite line reads from this scene where Papadoll is attacking Sandada's mansion is from Dorothy about how never owned a giant mutant attack people's houses. I can't say the full line. It's that quick. The fact that it was said so fast, I am curious how many takes that took. You know, the scene continues. I, of course, enjoy the Papadoll laugh along with Kevin's laugh. I think that part, I don't know, it just sings to me. Continue the scene. Of course, we have Meeko, we have Choo Choo. You know, I highly recommend, if you have not seen Catnapped, to go and watch it for yourself, because scenes like this intercut with transition into new settings. I love films that have good pacing, tell the story, but don't overstay their welcome, and this film does it phenomenally. One other thought that I have before moving on to Buburina is Papadoll could have also been Sorich. I know Sorich plays a lot of creatures in current anime, and just from re-listening to Papadoll, it does sound like an English actor, so food for thought. Also, I do want to give a shout out again to Phil Brewster, the audio engineer for this. I love with the dialogue how it's mixed in if other characters are talking. Like if Meeko were to say something while a guard is saying, hey, stop that, Meeko is just going to speak over them. But it's discernible enough with how Miko's talking, with how Sandy's talking, to where it feels like a kid who's just ignoring everything around them. I think the mixing for that was really well done, along with the creature sounds, the building noise. I just wanted to point that out. But one thing on Meeko is I do enjoy how Meeko is just the love and light of the whole film. I love how her character really didn't, it did develop, but Sandy carries the character so well. The innocence, the childlikeness. There's a scene later that I'll discuss whenever we get to Buburina's mansion that really encapsulates Meeko as a character, and I'll get to that soon. So we finally get to Buburina's palace, and we see Buburina on her throne. From the screenshot on the back of the box, from the description, the King Balloon Midas, if you will. And the first scene that we get with her is just being giddy and childlike for Papadoll returning. Like a kid getting exactly what they wanted for Christmas. And I think that intro scene, especially with Mary Elizabeth McGlynn's delivery, was phenomenal. I think Mary does a really good job of balancing adult child to batshit crazy. And overall, Buburina and all the scenes that she has in the film are just a treat. And before I continue, I do want to bring up one line that I think could have been done better. I don't know if that was the intention, but it was when Buburina just popped the, am I attractive to you? And it cuts over to Doh Doh, who's just the, huh? Like the sound. Face goes red, and then you have the whole scene with the fly landing on her arm, and him being scared, which Kevin sells beautifully. But just that delivery, I would have done another take personally. But maybe that was the intention. Maybe that is how the scene needed to play out. But there are just a few like that I mentioned, like with the Venus thing, where it just kind of was there. The timing didn't feel the best, or maybe it was just how it was transitioned into. But just lines like that are just a few critiques that I have. But overall, the scene plays out really nicely. It's very funny and really demonstrates how anything that touches her skin, not just her hands, but her arms, turns into a balloon. But I do find the inconsistency that some things will turn into a balloon that won't pop, like people, but a fly will pop, and some flowers and plants will pop. So that inconsistency is very interesting. We then transition back to Sundada's workshop, where, moves along the plot. They're working on a sleeping pill to put Papadoll to sleep. And of course, Sundada is the king of exposition. So we get the flashback scene after, of course, him expedizing of how Doh Doh fell under Buburina's spell by gazing upon her painting that Sundada has in his magical workshop. And one other thing to note is Hoi Hoi's "I feel dizzy." I really like that a lot. It reminds me of Sorich's performance in El Hazard, where he's talking about running out of booze. So that's why I call them a trio in these, because all three of the actors, Michael Sorich, Simon Prescott, and Michael Forrest, do just a really good job. But Prescott and Sorich especially they can do things with their voices and their performances, and they can really get into their characters. Like Sorich has been a drunk in El Hazard. He has such an elastic range. So him playing kind of the straight man in this trio is kind of funny. Next, we have the interaction between Choo Choo and Yasuo. After this, of course, we're going to get to the flashback stuff. And their first major interaction together, I think it really makes Leah's character shine as a tomboy. And the realization that Yasuo needs to get out of there by the next sunrise, or he will turn into essentially a catified, humified Papadoll, a monster. And Dorothy knocks it out of the park with the imagery of Yasuo turning into a monster, which they do show. I can't do it justice. I really can't. So that's one where you really just got to watch the movie to see it. Actually, I lied. We're not going to the flashback just yet, but we did see the painting that would be mentioned in the flashback. We're actually going to a really fun scene. It's another Wallace scene where there's a literal pyramid of cats that apparently Meeko convinced to stand up as a power. Did I just say power? I meant tower. For her then to, I do not know how to describe it, run up really fast like Sonic the Hedgehog and bounce off of them because she's really light. And that is according to Meeko, not me. And actually make it to this small window. Very cartoon logic, but I love it. I love to see it. With the ollie-oop being a very nice touch at the end. I don't know if that was added in to the script or if that was in the Japanese, some form of a sound effect, but I think the alley-oop was a really nice touch. Now we're going to the flashback after a small scene with Buburina gushing over Papadoll and the fur, and it's specifically the king saying, "Buburina! Buburina!" Going into the flashback, we have another example of a walla, this time with nobility, saying oohs and ahs as Remlam's performance is going on, which is a phenomenal sight to see, especially with the monster that he's able to conjure. And this is where we have our first introduction to the king, which is by Bob Pappenbrook, and the queen, which is Barbara Goodson, and of course our younger Buburina, which is voiced by Lenore Zan, who does a phenomenal job. And it is interesting to hear her in this role when she's, I think, nowadays known for playing Rogue and continuing to play Rogue in newer items. So not having her southern accent throws me off a little bit, but her performance as a young Buburina who hasn't exactly gone batshit yet, but has the trappings of a spoiled child who has never been told no in her life. Now, before I continue with the review on the vocal performances, I just want to note that the visual spectacle that we were treated to with Remlam turning his daughter into almost like a black swan cat dancer, very ballerina cat. I think the visual imagery that we're given prior to Lenore's screaming of stop just really, really sets it home, where it goes from pure music and visual to stop, stop, stop. I also love Bassett's performance as the magician. I think whenever young Buburina yells no more stupid tricks and he just takes it on the chin of, oh, I have more tricks for you, I think that delivery shows how mature the magician is at the time, because all bets are off whenever Buburina makes his daughter walk the tightrope and goes into, the real crux of the plot. Crux may not be the right word, but what really spurns the plot forward and kind of sets Buburina on this fate of being the balloon Midas. We go through the whole song and dance of young Buburina getting what she wants, the daughter falls, and one thing that I really like about this scene is, as I mentioned before, the craziness hasn't really set in. So you see this slightly concerned look on Buburina's face, but then she says, the young girl fell. That wasn't my fault. And that just kind of sets the tone for what Buburina eventually becomes, along with her curse, of course. I don't know, that scene, I think it's Lenore's last line. There could be a few more after that one, but that one just really sinks in. Young Buburina as a character is, oh, that I didn't do that. That wasn't me. Next, of course, we transition into a father who has lost everything. Lost his daughter to this selfish princess. So I love Bassett's transition from this professional magician to this revenge-driven character. And the way that the curse is kind of worded is essentially as, until you understand the feeling of loss, everything you touch will become a balloon. And honestly, it's not a bad thing. Like, if everything turned to gold, that would suck. But a balloon? That's even worse in my opinion. And I find it funny how even with that curse, she couldn't touch food or anything. Oh no, wait, she could touch food because she does sit on other things. I wonder if it's only living things. I'd have to go rewatch whenever she turned things to balloons. But I think it's only living things that turn into balloons, which is why we saw the fly and the plant, but other things don't turn into balloons. Interesting, I just thought of that. Now, after all this, it then transitions back into present day, where we get to see a now balloonified king and queen, understand why all the King's Guard have also been balloonified, which, as I mentioned before, Bob Pappenbrook and Barbara Goodson really send that home as being the king and queen. I think they fit the roles perfectly for this movie, and I do find it interesting how Bob wasn't in the credits. The only proof that I have of him being in the movie is in the script itself, so which I'm glad exists. And we go into probably my favorite Walla alongside vocal performance in the film. I love the editing for it, I love the delivery of it, and we're about to get to that shortly. Which, before we get to that, there is one scene that I still have not figured out in the whole movie, which is a mouse drawing the moon. Like, we're going to evening in essentially transitioning into our second act, or final act, however you want to look at it. And it's this girl looking at the moon with a rat on it. And this whole thing feels like Romeo and Juliet. Love that can't ever be. And it's kind of touched upon whenever Toriyasu is talking about rats and how, cats eat them in his world. And it's one of the few scenes that I just cannot figure out. Oh, and before I forget, I do want to go back and mention, whenever we get back from the transition from the past, we saw Buburina laughing, saying that her curse was not actually a curse. She loves the idea. It's not a punishment to be able to turn things into balloons. So I find that contrast of her being a kid versus an adult really striking with Mary Elizabeth McGlynn's performance, the maniacal laughing. As I said, it gives me very much The Rescuers, the villain from that, the crazy, was she the adoptive mother? I do not remember, but the appearances are very similar. So, now we're at probably my favorite scene that made me die laughing when I first watched the movie, which is both the Walla with Sandy Fox doing Wait a few seconds. Sandy goes, uh-huh, uh-huh. And it does this a few different times. And each time, Sandy's character, Meeko, catches on. So by the end of it, she's also saying, uh-uh, uh-uh, uh-huh, uh-huh, at the same time as the Walla. The other part of this scene is Mary Elizabeth McGlynn saying, woof, 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 woof. And I forget the mouse noise that she made. But the woof, I died laughing from listening to it for the first time. So just that double whammy of the Walla with the woof woofs, phenomenal on all fronts. And I love the mixing for the Walla. I think the recording for it, I don't know how many actors they would have brought in for that, but it was just really well done, especially syncing in Sandy's. I'm wondering if all of Sandy's uh-huhs and uh-uhs were recorded separately, or if they had her next to the Walla, or have her listen to the Walla to match her uh-huhs to match the Walla's uh-huhs. Because in the scene, Meeko hears them saying uh-huh, uh-huh. So I would assume if I was going to record it, I'd record the Walla first, then I would have Sandy come in and record hers, and then I would just sync them however you'd want to do it. That's how I would have personally done it. But there could have been scheduling, or depending on who they brought in for the Walla. It's a question I definitely want to ask to Phil when I get the chance. I just double checked the scene that I was referring to, and the mouse does say, squeak, 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 squeak. While actually it wasn't it was for I don't know. And so just that back and forth, and I love how they're little puppets, little string puppets for the characters to use, for the mouse, the dog, and the cat city. It says probably one of my favorite parts of the film for Mary, especially the woof woofs. Those got me so hard on my first playthrough. I was about to say playthrough. I am working on going through my first video game for the series, but I have to play those early on so then I can review them later. I'm also planning on streaming those as well, so the full playthrough will be streamed on either Twitch or Kick. I'll be uploading the VODs, and then I will be doing a review of them at some point in the future. Following our back and forth, Meeko breaks the Walla, calls Buburina a witch, and basically has the wrath of the princess on her. And, of course, Mary delivers what Mary always delivers in all the roles that I've heard her in thus far, and absolutely kills the delivery. I'm always curious how many takes some of these do end up taking, especially with the actors' understanding of their characters. And it feels like that Mary really did understand the type of character Buburina was supposed to be. And I am absolutely looking forward to when I get to interview her for this podcast, because she is most likely the largest well of knowledge, or at least one of them, from the industry back then, and specifically with Animaze Inc., considering how many properties she was in, both as an actress and as a director. Or both. Now, I need to continue forward, but I do not want to miss, we're transitioning in between the Walla collapse, and then we're going back to the failed Meeko balloon, is touching back on the mouse, the cat, and the moon, which, as I said, I love the world building in this. It's subtle, and there's things that we never learn about in the entirety of the movie, but that item right there is very interesting. And, of course, the crazy tomboy comment, along with Dorothy's reaction to Leah's delivery and almost clawing out Yasuo's eyes. So I find that very fun. I wish we had more interactions like that between Yasuo and Choo Choo, and I really wish they would have made a sequel to this. I know there was sequel bait at the end of the movie, which I'll mention before I wrap up. Next, we return back to Buburina's castle. We get the Balloon Walla, which is what I'm going to call it, where Buburina is turning all of her subjects that she captured into balloons, which then are carted off by Doh Doh's magical arm into the giant mouse that we learned about in the prior scene. And, of course, Walla is well mixed. And I do want to shout out again to Mary Claypool as the ADR scriptwriter. All the scripts have her name on it. I think the script writing was really phenomenal. As I said, I really want to see the full script for this. I want to see what the wallas look like. I want to see more of the text, like, okay, this is a teasing. Like, for example, right here, the Yasuo scene, I actually have this part of the script in front of me. It says, teasing, waiting for your prince. That stuff right there, it's fascinating. I want to see what the actors saw. And then if Kevin had any notes, or there were notes in other parts of the script, like if Mary had notes, I would love to see that. And then I do want to mention Kevin's line of, "Get back in there." I butchered that, but I'm just going to leave it in there. As I said, I got nothing on Kevin or many of the others' voiceover. It's not that I'm beating myself up. It's that, for me, just like Kevin, I believe in becoming the character, authenticity, if you will. So just to generate up a voice is one thing, but to believe you are that character, I believe, and I know Kevin believed this too from what I've heard, that believing in the character that you're portraying is what breathes life into the voice. You can impersonate all you want, but if you're not knowledgeable of what the character's story is, who they are, their background, I think the performance is just an impersonation. It's not the real thing. And I think that's what separates the good from the great. And that is my opinion, but I think that is truly what made Kevin special, both as a director and even as an actor. Now we're finally in the final act, and I'm going to jump to the scene where they are infiltrating, they being Yasuo and the trio of cats, Hoi Hoi, Hinoji, and Tsutoboke, to go rescue Meeko and Papadoll. With that being said, there's a scene where Choo Choo is holding Hinoji and Yasuo, and it doesn't go to plan. So, Sorich's performance as a cat who is having their tail hair pulled out is just a highlight of that scene, and I wanted to mention it here, because it's hard for somebody to imagine something that they don't possess. So I don't know how you describe you're in immense pain because your tail is being grabbed onto. But Sorich does a really good job of delivering that. Choo Choo struggling, and then overall, same goes for Dorothy's performance for Yasuo. Now, once everything's not gone to plan, the pill has now ended up in Buburina's mouth, and she has hence swallowed it, which is a funny performance when she does start to fall asleep. We get to this hypnosis eyes, which apparently Buburina has, just something new that we learned. And hearing both Dorothy and Leah kind of going, I don't want to say drunk, but hypnotic drunk. Hypnotic drunk is the best way to put that, is funny. And of course, the accompanying visuals of that are even funnier. And of course, with Choo Choo trying to distract Buburina with almost like a sword cat toy looking thing, which is funny that is a real weapon, and just seeing Buburina acting like a cat. And of course Mary sells that flawlessly. Also, before I forget, I do want to mention the inner cuts of the walla for the bouncing guards is really funny. Also, I do want to say having Hinoji and Hoi Hoi be similar ranges, much deeper voiceover, while having Tsutoboke kind of being this more, I want to say, higher voice, and then having it to where Tsutoboke actually takes a liking to Meeko. I think just does a really good job. Like, I know the writing's there to have Tsutoboke take a shine to Meeko, but I think the voiceover for it also shows that, specifically with the difference both visually appearance of Tsutoboke. Just, he looks like he's wearing glasses. I think he is wearing glasses, actually, I just noticed that. But we kind of are bouncing between both this Tsutoboke Miku, I keep on saying Meeko, and the Hinoji with Yasuo and Choo Choo. And with that, we kind of get into the final arc of the film. We have Buburina chasing around Yasuo and Choo Choo, and I don't want to get too detailed with this just because it is the finale. I really do want people to go watch this movie. But whenever the sleeping pill kicks in that Buburina swallowed a few scenes prior, the delivery is spot on. You go from this serious hypnotic scene to just this woozy, different from the hypnotic, but still very woozy. And of course, Mary sells it. It sounds like I am just gushing on everyone's performance. I have my critiques here and there, but I genuinely think that this dub, the way everything's delivered, is just phenomenal. Now, continuing on, this finale goes really fast, and I could go on about the little scenes here and there. Points I'm going to make note of is Sorach's delivery about how much time they have left throughout each of the subsequent scenes. Does a really good job of building up tension. I think Sorach does a really good job of delivering that, and I think how they do it. The timing is just too perfect, but that's just movie logic. But I do want to point that out. And one last thing to mention is the inclusion of the flashback scenes that make Yasuo kind of hit that last growth as a character, realizing for the audience as well why he started mistreating Papadoll, his love for UFOs and aliens, which his sister just so happens to have as well, and overall just coming to that realization of this is his dog and he loves his dog. And I feel that. I have a dog myself who there are times when I'm busy and I regret not giving him more belly rubs or more love, or there are times where I just forget to do things that I should have, and I can relate to that as a character. Yasuo is coming to terms that this is somebody who's been with him the whole time, and I love how it's near the end of the movie. It's kind of a nice cherry on top. And so we go through, the finale ends, we start wrapping everything up. The villain loses. Of course, there are dozens of performances mixed in. Like, this is a fast fire performance from everyone, from the heroes to the villains. Sandada getting his original form back, him saving the people from the balloon. Like, there is so much that's happening. I really need people to go see this movie. Said the English dub is available for free on YouTube. Just type in Catnapped YouTube and you will find it. Overall, I don't want to nitpick on the ending, because I want you guys to go watch it, but I do want to cover a few more things right at the epilogue. One last thing I want to talk about before I get to the finale, or the epilogue would be more accurate, is there are dozens and dozens and dozens of sound effects that are in this film, and one of the credits is additional sound effects. I've seen this in Ghost in the Shell, a bunch of other of the films and TV shows. Credited to Les Claypool. I am always curious on some of these sound effects, because you're mixing existing audio. Sometimes you might want to throw in a few extras. I am curious, just because of how seamless it is, I am genuinely wondering what was added. And I could always do a dub comparison, but I love watching these films. If I haven't seen them in Japanese, I like seeing them in English first, but I know I need to actually watch some of these in Japanese to get the full picture. So, we're at the end. They get back. It shows that only 3 minutes have passed, just as they said at the beginning, so continuity is key. However, we notice that they leave for school, let's just say around 7 a.m., so let's just say 7:03 for easy math. That would be 13 hours, about 2/3, no, not 2/3, but let's say equitable time to whenever they first showed up to go look for them. And just so happens the cats are back, saying that Buburina is causing trouble again, or they're in trouble. Kind of setting up a sequel, which I do like the idea that, for them, days and days have passed and adventures are going on in Banipal Witt, but whenever the leads go, it's 3 minutes in the real world. So we go into the credits, which the opening and the credits, I forgot to mention, phenomenal music, phenomenal visuals. Overall, phenomenal movie. Said I kind of left the ending. I mentioned a few of my favorite stuff, but there's definitely some stuff I left out on purpose, just to keep the surprise there. But overall, performance is really well done. The mixing, the acting, the directing, the script writing. Said I would kill for script notes. I would kill to see a lot of these behind the scenes stuff and archive it. The goal of it is to archive as much of this as possible. I save the samples, which will be going on my archive, the script samples. At some point, I want to scan full scripts and archive them for free, because this stuff will become lost media, and that would be really sad, considering it is a cornerstone of where this industry is now. It wouldn't exist without these processes, without these scripts, without these stories. Wrapping up this episode, I do want to get a few things out of the way, and then one final announcement, and then we'll be all done. First and foremost, I do want to give a huge thank you to Joe Romersa. He has been very helpful in teaching me that not editing a podcast is a bad thing, to put it bluntly. But he was very kind to edit my first episode and give me a demo on simply tightening it up. It may seem simple, but to me it was a phenomenal gift. His knowledge will be put to use, and it meant the world for someone who was integral to this history, helped me with fixing my first episode and teaching me how to do this stuff going forward. And also, I do want to thank him as well. I know in the future I might be relying on some of the scripts that he has. I was afraid that a lot of these scripts were lost to time or were lost whenever Kevin Seymour passed away and his estate went for sale. The current scripts I'm looking at right now for this episode were from the estate sale records, which, as I said, I'll be linking down below in the podcast description. But I know for scripts that Joe Romersa has, I do plan on asking and using, hopefully, those scripts to better deliver this history, these stories, if you would, about Kevin, about the properties that he worked on, and about Animaze as a whole. And with that, I will be announcing my next episode next week, so stay tuned to that. I'm actually going to start releasing episodes weekly, not full episodes like this, mind you. These episodes will still come out every other week, but on the off weeks, I will be releasing updates either about what episode is coming down the pipeline, how my archive's coming along, or any unique stories that I hear about, just updates to the project. So stay tuned to that. For my next episode, though, I will say I am leaning towards doing an anime or a video game that Joe directed or highly thought of, just so I can get more insight for that episode and potentially have a script to look at. So that being said, I want to give a shout out to some new people who I've had the pleasure to speak with and who I plan on trying to get their stories for the podcast. Those include Skip Stelrick, Kirk Thornton, Michael Sorick, Yuri Lowenthal, and David Hayter. And then, of course, I do want to give thank you to Sandy Fox, Lex Lang, Jameson Price, Peter Lurie, David Vincent, also including as well Wendy Lee, and David Lodge. Among many more actors that I've talked to about Kevin, I look forward to adding their stories to this project. Lastly, thank you again for listening to Animazing, the stories of Kevin Seymour. I have been your host, Aramis, and I'm going to go ahead and let Kevin play us out. Thank you so much.